Probably could use a lemon. Just came back from a walk. It's 30 degrees today in Melbourne. Had the AC on, just came back, cooled down. I think it's almost been a month since I uploaded. Just been learning a lot. Been working like 5-6 days and then literally just resting on the days off and just learning, catching up on the seminars. They're all like recorded. So I just try to catch up on them as soon as I can. I've been learning a lot and understanding, just been learning, you know, and while I'm learning and interpreting, I haven't been comfortable to try and share the knowledge and understanding because I'm still like progressing, you know, still evolving. So I want to talk about a topic, you know, literally 1 week, and then a couple of days later I've evolved. The consciousness goes deeper and deeper. Every time I want to upload, I realize that like now I have to, like, let's say, you know, I wanted to upload about a topic maybe on Monday, and then by the time it gets to Monday, I've kind of restructured how I want to deliver my understanding of that topic, and then I'll get to Monday, and then it's an even deeper understanding. So I'm not sure whether to upload, knowing full well that I'm going to have a deeper understanding, you know, in a few days' time. It's like, imagine, like, you know, you're just rewriting the essay. You know what I mean? You write it up, you're ready to submit, and then by the time you finish it and you read it again, so in that time, just by proofreading, you've already improved and you've already advanced in your depth of consciousness that, you know, you're like, no, I can't submit this. I got to start again. So that's how I started with the whole channel. You know, that's why I was saying, like, even though I felt like I wanted to just start the topics again with Jungian psychology and masculine therapy, I know that it's really just a good way to, I mean, documenting everything. You know, it's good to, like, you know, look back on, you know, in whenever, however long, just like look back and see the kind of level of progression, you know. So I spoke on the last video about, we kind of went back to the start. Like, I know I'm getting through the magician archetype. Just throughout the seminars, I decided that it was important to go back and try and elaborate more on what this thing is in your psyche, right? This big, unconscious animal thing in your psyche, right? The Moby Dick, you know? The dragon. It's the dragon. That's what I love about Robert Moore and his students, you know, his successors, the ones that I'm learning of. They're not just so ambiguous and anthropomorphic, you know what I mean? They don't try to keep it as objective and scientific as unnecessarily possible. Sometimes it's necessary to give a human, you know, some kind of idea, an analogy, right? That's why they call it the dragon, because it's this thing in your psyche. It can't be domesticated. It can't ever be domesticated, but it can be trained in a way to help it understand and establish a relationship, right? There can be a relationship established with this big fucking thing, right? So there can be a relationship that's established and mutual understanding, right? The human ego, the conscious ego's understanding of the sheer eternal divinity of this thing, right? The power. It's the human's ego. It's your job, your responsibility to understand the significance of what this thing really is, and how much more aware it is than you are, because the way I know I'm just superimposing Jungian understanding, you know, and think about it, the Freudians as well, like the only difference is the Freudians, they don't really believe that it's a structured, you know what I mean? They believe it's just eternal chaos, and you kind of just have to work that, you know, your conscious ego has to kind of work in relation with this thing to individuate somehow. But the Jungians really managed to progress that and structure it, right? They're called Robert Moore, who was referred to as the cartographer of the psyche. He was the cartographer, the excavator. He's the psychological archaeologist. You know, the archaeologists, implying that these psychologists, they're scientists, right? They're scientists. They're just discovering, and they're trying to develop a consistent method to try and structure this thing, right? The archetypal self, when it is unconscious, it is the dragon, right? It is structured in 4 archetypes, right? So it's the archetypal self, but it's not 4 archetypes, you know, like I kind of implied in my previous videos. Like I separated the archetypes, you know, but now I understand that the correct understanding is that the objective psyche, your objective psyche, your objective unconscious, is the archetypal self that carries the potentials of these 4 masculine archetypes. And depending on which archetype you are regressing in, will tell the therapist, or your friends, or your family, or the world, how you're acting out in what archetype. You know, depending on what archetype your behavior is regressed in, will show the world what kind of pathology your personality is stemming into. So we're just learning on all the personality traits, the tendencies, the personality disorders, and we try and understand a lot of what these archetypes and the shadow archetypes, how they look like, you know, and you try and structure your own, you know what I mean, as a therapist. Like, you have to be deeply psychoanalyzed, right? And the way you do that is by trying to figure out how you're currently configured, right? How your inner structure, your Mayan pyramid, is structured, right? And then when you figure out what archetype really has your personality, then you can figure out maybe where your shadow is. You know, you might be, you know, in your lover, your magician. You know what I mean. You're studying business. You're learning. Could be, you know, you could be an artist, or, you know, a day trader, and you're just studying and learning, and 10 hours a day, and you're just gathering, you know, understanding. You know, you're in your lover, you have your hobbies, your passions, your outlets. You know, you can see the helmet in the back. That's a lover, you know. That's lover. Ducati V2. It's you're not. I mean, it's you realize it's not the hobby itself or the activity itself. You know what I mean? It's your subconscious knowing that it's a specific activity that your personality needs to do for it to produce the emotion, you know, that it seeks, which is bliss, ecstasy, you know, joy, delight, you know. And you realize, okay, I'm a lover, magician, you know, I need more warrior to execute, you know, to be able to understand when I need to make the decision, right? To pull the trigger. I don't know whether you're trading or you're, you know, getting into business and you need to confront, you know, prospects, clients for deals. You need more king, or, you know, you realize that your shadow warrior was what was leading to your self-abusive tendencies, right? Let's go back to the day trader, right? Look, the point is, I'm trying to show you how the dragon is making you act out unconsciously, but it can regress your personality into one of its 4 archetypes, right? So you know that, you know, you love a magician, and you know, you've studied all these courses and you read all these books, and now you have a knowing, an understanding, and you realize that because of the lack of integration of your warrior, you shadowed the warrior, and he's managed to come through your personality unconsciously through sadomasochism, which led to you being some gym freak. You know what I mean? Now you're in the best shape of your life. Like, you know, you've just been abusing yourself at the gym. I mean, you see him. You see him in the gym. You know, they're disproportionately built. Not physically. I mean, it's like physically they look amazing, right? Proportionally. Sorry, that would have confused you. They're proportionally built. Their physique is amazing, right? And their body. But it's disproportional to the amount of discipline that they've allowed in that area of their lives, right? They sadistically, masochistically abuse themselves in the gym while still being so anxious, still being so stressed, unhappy, and anxious, you know. The shadow warrior hasn't allowed them to integrate any other energy. archetypal energy. So they're not integrated. So as the therapist, as the student, right? We're the students. They're all students. I mean, even the professor was a student, you know, Carl Jung, Edward Edinger. They're all students, and as the student, your job is to become conscious of where you stand consciously and where you have been unconsciously acting out your whole life, right? And then we get into, then we get into idealizing transference. Oh man, this was heavy, man. This was heavy. See, I spoke about one of the videos about, you know, you unconsciously idealize and transfer your archetypes, you know, onto the tribal elders, and in modernity, it happens to be the parents, right? You unconsciously do that, you know, as a kid, you know, appropriately, and throughout your life, you never really integrate the archetypes. You just unconsciously project them on other human beings, other conscious minds. And you need to become aware of who and what you've been projecting and giving this transference to, you know, which we'll just get into. Yeah, oh man, I gotta really take it slow, you know. Like, I gotta take it slow with the videos. When it comes to this part, you know, because this is the reason. I mean, I truly became conscious to the reason of why I chose to journal everything, because when I started the channel a few months ago, I was conscious that there is a reason, that there's something that I'm trying to elaborate to my 3 or 4 audience, right? However long it takes for the mass to become conscious, but there's something there. Now, 4 or 5 months later, right? I've managed to go that deep in the seminars and the books to be able to put in sentences and words, right, the vocabulary, to illustrate what the hell happened the last almost 30 years of my life. See, back to the archetypes, right? You either integrate them or you unconsciously project them. You unconsciously project your king, your independence, your royalty, your gold, your inheritance, right? Your inherited gold. You project it onto your parents, to your dad, to your boss, HR, to the power, right? You transfer your power. Most of us do, and most of us are unconscious of it. And unfortunately, the ones that are conscious of your idealizing transference, they themselves, right, specifically the parents, right? Forget about it. We're going to get into the celebrities, we're getting into the religion. We're going to get to the religion, but let's just stick to family for now. If you know what I'm talking about, you know. You transfer your magus and you're royal to your parents, and they are aware of the transference. Yeah, they might not have the freaking vocabulary, but they're conscious of what's being transferred to them. They're conscious of the stewarding that they have been appointed to, right? Or anointed with. And unfortunately, most of them haven't ever received the gold and the royal that they transferred to their parents. They never received it back from theirs, right? So their subconscious, their magus, their magician, right? The one that's aware of the archetypal transference. The magician in their unconscious doesn't believe that it's necessary to integrate, this child's warrior or the child's king. You know what I mean? My child doesn't need, my son doesn't need to be aware of his feelings. He doesn't need to be aware of his pain. He just needs to suppress and repress and work and abuse himself like I abused myself, like my dad abused himself. So how could the magician, the shadow magician, ever let the ego, another ego, become aware? Like, the child unconsciously hands over the keys to its kingdom, to the parent. But the keys are only transferred to the magician, right? The magician is the one that carries the keys to the consciousness, to the kingdom, right? And the shadow magician, the immature magician, why would they ever hand the keys back? Why would they ever give the child the keys to their own kingdom when they truly, in their subconscious, does not believe it's necessary? The magus, the immature magus, doesn't see the necessity for the warrior. What's the point of the shadow magician looks at the warrior, aggression as incompetence, stupid. Aggression is useless, and violence is useless. Because it thinks it's managed to convince the ego that it survived without the warrior, but it hasn't, because it's not integrated, right? It doesn't believe that any of the other archetypes are necessary to be integrated. So I hope I just got a little bit of more clarity on the archetypes and the how the structure. You know what I mean? It's one thing. It is primitive, man. It is in your mind. It is in your unconscious. Your magician knows, it is aware, but if your magician is not integrated, it's not gonna lift the veil, the veil of enchantment, because it fears that if the ego becomes conscious of the enchantment that it was under, it fears that, breaking that enchantment will kill you both. So it has to keep the ego under enchantment, and it has to keep the veil, because it's scared of the weight of responsibility that the ego must carry when it becomes conscious. You talk about the grief, it's a grieving period. When you wake up, like the consciousness, the solutio, in alchemy, it's the process of rebirth. It's a grieving, painful process. Um, it is in your mind, you know. It's you're unconscious to it, but it is conscious. It is awake. In fact, it never sleeps. It never sleeps. It comes to you in your dreams and it plays tricks on you in your dreams and it laughs at you sadistically. Because it knows that it has control over you and you don't know how to deal with it because because you're the human being and this isn't human. It's not human. It's pre-human, you know. It's had millions of years of evolution, man. Trial and error. I mean, you look at like a professional, 50, 60 years experience, and you can see their unconscious incompetence, right? They are unconsciously competent. Imagine 3 million years. It knows what you need to survive. And it will do its best to pull the strings and pull your body towards behaviors that will allow it to manifest. And if you suppress it, it will come blasting through infantile grandiosity. It'll blast through the ego defense walls of your personality, and it'll hijack the reins. You know, remember, I'm the captain. I'm the captain. Look at me. You know. Look at it. Look at it. I'm the captain. Read it. And good luck to you.